In Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker falls, the Jedi Order burns, and a black mask becomes the sound of fear. But what if he didn't vanish into that armor? What if Anakin lived, faced what he'd done, and chose to fight the Empire from the outside? What if Anakin Skywalker led the Rebel Alliance? In this version, that's exactly what happens. And the galaxy doesn't fracture the same way. It learns to breathe again, by choice, not command. Let's begin. The heat at the edge of the Mustafar River licks the rock like a warning. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands above a ruined slope, the red light turning his face older than it is. Below him, a figure drags itself forward, scorched robes, a hand clawing at ash, the other arm gone. Anakin tries to speak. Smoke answers for him. The lava slides closer, quiet and deadly. Obi-Wan tells himself to leave. He says the words in his head with the certainty of a creed. Anakin chose this path, and the Order paid the price. He turns. He hears the crackle change. He feels the faintest tug in the Force. Familiar, stubborn, alive. A spark, buried under everything he hates about what just happened. He stops. "Blast it," he whispers to no one, and climbs down. He hooks Anakin's arm over his shoulders. Curses come in a hoarse stream. Then the weight goes slack. The ship lifts off with two patients and a future that refuses to die. On a cold deck under white light, droids sew, fit, and fuse. New limbs click to old nerves, back to stings. Anakin sleeps so long that the sound of the medical ward becomes a second heart. Padme gives birth in a nearby suite that smells like clean cloth and worries. Her first strength is the cry of the twins. Her second is Obi-Wan's whisper. "He's alive." She smiles through tears because she wants to believe that can still mean something good. Quietly, Obi-Wan lends what healing he can through the Force, while med droids stabilize Padme, enough to steady her vitals and keep the decline we remember from ever starting. When Anakin wakes, he reaches for a saber that is not there. The metal in his forearms answers a beat later than thought. He tries to stand and sways. "You won't go far on those yet," Obi-Wan says from the doorway. Easy stance, one hand near his belt anyway. The old rhythm almost returns. Barb, counterbarb, a lecture about patience. But the space between them is crowded with folk and screams. "Where is Padme? Where are my children?" Anakin asks, voice low, brittle. "Safe," Obi-Wan says. "Safe from you until I know what you are." The words cut because they're meant to. Then Obi-Wan softens. "I saved you because I still sense it, the part of you that isn't swallowed by rage. Find it, or I will stop you." The door closes. Anakin stares at hands that look like someone else's idea of hands and realizes what the silence in his chest is, the lie he built his fall on. Power didn't save Padme. Choice will. He breathes. He listens. He plans. On Coruscant, a different plan takes root. Sheaves of laws rearrange themselves into a crown. Palpatine speaks softly about order, safety, reconstruction. Imperial clones patrol wide boulevards. Governors receive sealed packets with new rules and old threats. The Senate becomes a theater where applause lines are counted like votes. Some cheer, some kneel, some watch and wait. When Anakin vanishes from the recovery ward, alarms follow him into the lanes. The Empire listens for his ship. He flies without a signature, changes hull plates in shadowed bays, and learns to move like a rumor. He lands on worlds that never felt the Senate's warmth and only knows the Empire by the weight of boots. He uses a voice that used to lead legions to teach farmers how to vanish, dockhands how to jam a scanner, and militia crews how to melt away after the shot. He calls in favors from smugglers who still owe the hero with no fear, and they hate the nickname less when it buys medicine and clean water for a town the map forgot. The first faces he trusts are ones he has bled with. A battered Corvette translates into Kashyyyk space on a cold dawn. In the high city that sways in the canopy, Wookiee elders listen to Ahsoka Tano speak about inhibitor chips and lost brothers. Captain Rex stands by the rail with 200 clones whose eyes are clear again. Anakin steps from the lift. New gate, old presence. The embrace with his former Padawan is quick and tight. The salute with Rex is briefer. "Sir, Rex says. It's good to have orders again. Not orders, Anakin corrects. A purpose. They build a base where branches cradle platforms and mists hide transport lifts. They keep the noise low. They talk in code. They get very good at not being found. Jedi trickle in, Quinlan Vos, with a grin that hides edges. Shock Tai, whose death turns out to be a temple rumor. She escaped into the underlevels through service corridors and lay low until the signal, Plo Koon, alive by a heartbeat. He punched out over Cato Moidia before the shots finished his fighter, scars, and a rebuilt respirator telling the rest. Some come openly. Others send signals from dark places and wait for extractions that have to work the first time. 2 years vanish into work. The Outer Rim learns to whisper a different name. Not rebellion, not yet. Only a phrase people say with a little hope under it. The New Order. Not Palpatine's order. Something older, smaller, and kinder. Jedi and clones who move like rain, arriving where the fire is, leaving before the clone stormtroopers can learn where the drops began. They raid supply convoys and redistribute the cargo. They free prisoners quietly, replacing entire cells with decoys that keep guards talking to air. They cut down slaver rings on Ryloth and Kessel. They patch farms with droids whose serial numbers used to belong to battlefields. They don't sit at senatorial tables. They sit on crates with miners and ask what's needed. People remember that the word Jedi once meant help arriving instead of judgment handed down. The Empire notices. Of course it does. Palpatine calls for experiments in fear. One governor asks for more time, calmer methods, better roads. Another, with a clipped accent and a taste for diagrams, suggests something else. Make an example so large that it fills the sky. The doctrine is simple: crush publicly and let the echo do the rest. He files it under Governor Will Huff Tarkin, soon to be Grand Moff. Before that echo, a different storm crosses Anakin's path. A man arrives with no uniform and too much confidence. He introduces himself in a mountain pass on Solist, where rebel scouts expected a siege and got silence. His veterans carry insignias stripped from half a dozen forces no one misses. Major Van Hel, he says, and smiles like a knife. Most call me Venom. Others call me worse. I hear you want to break an empire. Anakin folds his arms. I want to free people. Same road, Venom answers. Different shoes. His transports hiss open to reveal empty racks. No prisoners, only helmets. Imperial helmets. Planetary defense helmets. They were eager for reinforcements. We obliged, he says, not bragging, just inventorying. I fight for whoever pays in results. You pay for the results. Rex dislikes him on sight. Ahsoka watches with a face that holds questions and knives at once. Anakin does math. Guerrillas do what armies cannot. Venom is a force that could break supply webs faster than any battalion. He offers a hand. Venom takes it without looking away. Months go black and red. Venom's bands hit like flies that sting and vanish. When Imperial commandos go hunting, clones with blue stripes on their helmets pull maps from the enemy's pockets and burn the safe houses behind them. When a prefect raises taxes to starve a town into cooperation, smugglers drop crates with rebel seals and wanted posters, and suddenly the town chooses who to fear. Stories start traveling faster than ships. Forests of impaled troopers. Transports filled with eyes and ears dumped on parade grounds. Garrisons that wake to find their prisoners gone and their officers gagged on their own medals. Venom calls it arithmetic. Ahsoka calls it rot. Anakin calls it necessary and hates himself a little each time he does. Is this truly the only way? He asks one night, watching the glow of a city they've just emptied of soldiers and too many civilians. Venom scratches at a scar. The Empire taught people to accept other people's pain as the price of quiet. I teach them pain has interest. They can pay it now or later. Either way, it gets paid. Obi-Wan would never. Obi-Wan isn't here, Venom says, not cruel, simply accurate. But Obi-Wan is not gone. He steps from a ramp at dawn on a world that smells like dust and ion scorch. Hood pushed back, beard grayer, eyes the same. Anakin doesn't reach for him. Obi-Wan doesn't pretend this reunion can be easy. They walk a perimeter in silence until words decide to show up. You're building something that wins, Obi-Wan says. And something that scares me, The Empire made it simple, Anakin answers. We complicate it, we lose. We complicate it because we're people, not hammers. Obi-Wan's tone is soft. And because the Force refuses to be a blunt instrument for long. Before Anakin can answer, the sky writes the Imperial doctrine he's been warned about. Star Destroyers descend to low orbit in formation so neat it looks like a parade. The first lance of green slices a mountain in two. The second turns a forward base to molten glass. The ground ripples. The air screams. Tarkin's lesson is as elegant as it is obscene. You cannot hide if we choose not to look carefully. Anakin gets everyone underground. The caverns shake. Dust becomes a fog. He stands at the mouth of the last hangar with Venom at his side, watching the city below turn into a drawing done in char and light. You seem very calm, Anakin says, voice flat. I'm thinking about the governor's broadcasts, Venom replies. He told people to stay in their homes, to trust the Empire. I'm going to make sure his home is the only one on fire when we're done. No, Anakin says. We're done with theater. Not theater, Venom says, and for the first time there's heat in his voice. Memory. He goes anyway. He takes a few hundred like him, faces with bandanas, rifles stamped with 5 histories, and moves through alleys as if he owns them. When the smoke clears, a city is not a city anymore. The governor's mansion stands untouched. The gates wear garlands of heads. The broadcasts that follow are efficient. A warlord is replaced with a zealot, and the casualties multiply in the confusion. Anakin walks the blackened streets with Obi-Wan in his ear like a conscience. He lets the shame arrive. He holds it long enough to recognize what it is. Then he moves. The next operation looks simple because the plan is not about gore. A governor known for his restraint sits in a fortified camp with a fleet overhead and 1,000 troops around him. He believes the rebels are animals. The rebels let him keep believing that. Venom stages something loud at the perimeter and grins when the spotlights boil toward him. Ahsoka and a clone squad are already inside, gaunt and efficient, cutting comms one node at a time. Anakin and Obi-Wan slip through a service tunnel with 3 troopers who still call him General under their breath. In the command tent, the governor raises a polite hand to ask for parley. Obi-Wan answers by pulling the weapons from 2 guards and stacking them neatly on the floor. Anakin steps forward. You're going to send a message to the fleet, he says. You're going to say you barely escaped an attack. You're going to call for a tight formation and priority fire on ground coordinates I'm about to give you. And then you're going to come with us. You'll doom us all, the governor whispers. No, Anakin says. Only those who refuse to see what you've built. The Jedi mind trick pushes through a mind already trained to obey procedure, and the governor's hands move to the console like it's any other inspection. Above, ships rearrange themselves into a neat net waiting to be cut. When the Star Destroyer Judicator brings its engines to full to cover the maneuver, the bridge doors bloom outward. A squad of clones throws flash charges into a corridor that once smelled like new paint. Anakin and Obi-Wan cross the threshold under a storm of red bolts that curve away from them as if the air decided to help. Officers try to remember the correct manual page for "The Force is here." Their rifles leave their hands, their courage leaves their faces. Skywalker. Kenobi, Tano. He prepares for a duel because the future won't stop knocking. The endgame looks like a heist because that's the part of war Anakin has learned to love. The moment when precision replaces fire. A Star Destroyer arrives over Coruscant trailing smoke and panic, reactor showing critical. The fleet opens lanes to help. Shuttles peel off, full of evacuees. They carry forged ISB priority tags and Compnor seals, clones with stolen badges, Jedi with hoods pulled down, and Wookiees trying to look like maintenance crews. The destroyer doesn't explode. It nudges the blockade until ships smash into ships in a domino chain you can watch from 1,000 windows. The noise buys time. The time buys everything. In the hangars below the Senate complex, Ahsoka leads a cut-through flight crews barely awake to the idea that war can happen at home. She kicks off a wall, takes a tie with one hand, and tosses it like a toy into the next bay over. In the barracks, Cody and Wolf wake half a legion with the old bark that made men sit up straight in the Clone Wars and the new promise that they won't die for a lie today. Cody's chip came out in a back bay op that left him quiet for days, then clear forever. In the streets, Bail Organa's network of aides and advocates opens doors that were never supposed to open. They route Padme through service lifts guarded by clones whose chips are already cleared. And in a lift that whispers thoughts to itself to keep from shaking, Anakin and Obi-Wan ride up to the place where a Republic died. The office looks the way it always did, polished, precise, a theater where a man played wisdom for years. Palpatine rises as the doors part. The saber in his hand bleeds light without apology. Lightning crawls over his fingers as if eager. "My boy," he says softly, "you were always going to come back to me." "I did," Anakin says and ignites blue. Ahsoka slips in at Ahsoka forces Sidious into a block he hates. Obi-Wan rotates his wrist at the exact angle Form 3 always promised would matter. Anakin takes the hand that throws lightning because sometimes symbols are useful. The red blade skitters, the mask of the wise chancellor slips, and the man under it snarls. He draws power through the floor like a snake pulling itself long and raises both arms to flood the room with night. He never lowers them. The doors open behind him as a line of white armor raises rifles and then salutes. Order 65, one of the contingency statutes from the Kaminoan protocols, has been invoked by a senator with Jedi support. Padme Amidala steps into the room with a datapad in her hand and the kind of courage that doesn't need a saber. "For crimes against the Republic," she says, voice steady. "Sheev Palpatine, you are under arrest." For a heartbeat, Sidious considers making this everyone's tomb. He sees clones who once shot at Jedi now standing between them and the room. He sees a woman who will not flinch. He sees a young man whose eyes do not carry the awe he used to. And he calculates. He lowers his arms. The binders click. The quiet afterward feels like a new kind of sound. Mace Windu's end doesn't arrive with spectacle. He returns to the temple because the Force shows him a point where futures split like hairline cracks in glass. He finds Yoda waiting at the top of the steps, smaller than he remembers, somehow larger. Plo Koon stands a little behind, calm as always. Anakin steps forward with his saber off. "This is not your home anymore, Skywalker," Mace says. Not unless you are comfortable in a cell. I'm not, Anakin answers. But we can talk about cells after trials, not before. Mace comes hard and low. Anakin meets him and holds, surprised at the weight. The fight becomes a conversation neither is good at. Mace calls on something that makes the air dim. Yoda's blade flashes into the space where darkness thinks it owns the light. The exchange ends with a cut above Mace's knee and a look that is more painful than any wound. Yoda's disappointment. The clones who arrive do not fire. They salute. The arrests they make are lawful in a way the galaxy forgot law could be. The Empire doesn't fall in a day. It sheds authority like a snake forced to molt by a sudden season. Governors declare themselves provisional. Warlords test their teeth on nearby systems and lose them on better-trained militias. Kaminoan contracts are terminated, and the production lines wind down faster than anyone there expected. Shipyards discover that maintenance schedules can be rewritten by people with courage and wrenches. Through it all, the thing that calls itself a rebellion becomes honest enough to use the name. Anakin refuses titles. He accepts responsibility. He sits with Bail Organa and Mon Mothma in rooms where people argue about budgets because civilization is mostly budgets. He rides jump seats to backwater towns where a single generator will change a winter. He speaks to troops who once would have died for him without thinking and tells them to think first. He lets Ahsoka write the new code of conduct for Jedi who will not be police again. They will be guardians, teachers, and last resorts. Obi-Wan helps build the training hall he wishes he'd had, one where a young man could say, "I'm afraid," and hear, "So am I. Let's learn how to carry it." Padme walks halls that used to demand gowns and now tolerate boots. She writes laws that limit the emergency powers she wishes had been limited years ago. She kisses her children on the head and tells them stories from a time when the word Senate didn't taste like ash. Luke takes apart a thing that isn't broken just to see how it works. Leia watches debates with eyes that already know when someone is speaking to avoid doing. With Sidious neutralized and the Order reconstituting outside politics, Yoda abandons exile as unnecessary penance. He returns to the temple only when voices echo again in halls that were silent too long. He naps at the back of a class and resists the urge to correct every stance because he can feel the current is different now and that is enough. Plo Koon trains a group of clones who want to keep serving, this time with names on their armor plates that won't be taken from them again. Rex stands in a hangar and tells a line of men to choose. "Go home if home stands," he says, "or stay and help build one here. Either way, this is the last time someone else decides for you, Pao." Helmets go down on benches like offerings. Some leave, some don't. None are wrong. The remnants do not go quietly. A Grand Moff with too many charts and not enough sense tries a last demonstration over a frontier moon. The rebel fleet that meets him is smaller than his, hungrier, and better loved by the crews who keep it running. He fires on a city and misses because the systems he trusted were sabotaged by the same dockhands who now sit on rebel councils. His flagship dies confused, and the stars look the same as they did before. On Naboo, a tomb receives fresh flowers. Sometimes a senator brings them, sometimes a handmaiden. Once a tall man with scars stands there at dawn with a boy and a girl who chase each other around a tree while their mother pretends not to watch them through a tear that she swears is from the wind. The man kneels and says nothing, because there are words that don't know how to pull weight like this without breaking. Years pass. The Republic that grows feels ordinary in a way that makes veterans smile in private places. There are arguments, there are delays, there is boredom that tastes like safety. There are still pirates and crooks and planets that like to be stubborn because that is how they know they are alive. There are fewer prisons. There are more schools. One evening, under the soft hum of new lights in a room that used to be a battlefield, Ahsoka watches two teenagers circle with low sabers. She says, again, only when they laugh too much to keep their guard up. Obi-Wan stands at the door and thinks about the first time he saw a boy swing a blade like a promise and hopes he is doing better this time. Anakin sits with Bail on a balcony that doesn't belong to one man anymore. "You could have taken it," Bail says, not accusing, just marking a path not chosen. "The throne, the title, the center." Anakin shrugs. "I wore a crown once," he says. "It didn't fit." He looks down at a plaza where citizens are replanting a tree they tore out years ago to make room for a statue. The stump is still there. They leave it and plant next to it. This is leadership, he says, planting next to the stump and telling the truth about why it's there. What if Anakin Skywalker led the Rebel Alliance? In this timeline, he did. Not as a general wearing a mask of mercy, not as a tyrant pretending to be necessary, but as a man who learned to separate strength from cruelty and used it to build instead of burn. The Empire didn't collapse because one sword fell true. It collapsed because people remembered what help felt like and then helped back. If you enjoyed this alternate path, stick around. There's a galaxy of what-ifs to explore, and 1,000 quiet choices that turn into history. Until next time, may the Force be with you.